Our mother cried behind closed doors, but I was the one who kept the doors closed. I spent years protecting my sisters from the woman who gave us life, and nearly destroyed it. Now she wants to come back. And she brought something with her that we were not ready to see. She used to cry behind closed doors, but I was the one holding the door shut. My name's Rachel. I'm 26. And I spent half my life making excuses for a woman who kept choosing pain, for herself and for us. We lived in Ashford, North Carolina. 3 siblings and a mother who loved the sound of her own heartbreak. My brother Jamie left when he was 17. Just vanished one day and never came back. That left me and my younger sisters Mallory and Zoe. When I was 15, our mother met Carter. He sold satellite dishes and smelled like beer even in church. But he had a truck and paid for things, so she called him a provider. He called us brats. Said my sisters needed discipline, and I needed a man in the house. I remember those words, because they were the first time I ever saw my mother smirk while someone else was hurting me. The house got smaller after he moved in. We tiptoed, whispered, slept in clothes just in case we had to run outside. I learned to pack a bag in under 2 minutes. Mallory started wetting the bed again. Zoe stopped speaking for almost 4 months. I told Mom. She said we were exaggerating. That Carter had a temper, but deep down, he loved us. I stopped asking for help after that, until the day Zoe came to me crying, shaking. She wouldn't say it at first, but I knew. She just kept saying, "Don't let him in the room." So I did what she couldn't. I walked to school the next morning and told my biology teacher everything. And by sundown that day, I'd set in motion the one thing my mother could never forgive, getting her children taken away from her. The social worker's name was Gina. She had calm eyes and a legal pad she never stopped writing on. She listened to me without blinking, nodding gently, like she already knew how the story would go. By the time I got home that evening, they were waiting on the porch, her, another woman with a clipboard, and 2 officers in blue. Mallory was still in school. Zoe was clinging to our grandmother, who'd been called in last minute. Carter wasn't there. They said it would just be temporary. They said they had to investigate. They said they were doing what was best. But all I heard was the silence in my mother's eyes. Not grief. Not fear. Not shock. Just cold fury. Like she'd already decided whose fault it was. We moved in with Nana the next week, all 3 of us. She lived 30 miles outside Ashford, in a drafty 2-bedroom farmhouse that smelled like wood smoke and laundry powder. She gave us warm food, soft beds, and more quiet than we knew what to do with. For the first time in years, I slept with the door open. Mallory started humming again while brushing her hair. Zoe asked for a library card, but Mom didn't call. Not once. Not even when the investigation ended. And she lost custody for good. No court date. No final hearing. Just a letter that arrived in the mail. Full guardianship transferred to our grandmother. The envelope was thin, but the silence that followed it felt permanent. I tried not to read into it. I told myself she was ashamed, that maybe somewhere deep down she knew she'd failed. I clung to that belief like a bandage, because the alternative, that she didn't care, would have left scars I couldn't afford. Years passed. I got into a nursing program 2 towns over and commuted by bus. Mallory joined the dance team. Zoe got straight A's and started collecting enamel pins. We built a life out of leftovers. And Nana, she stitched it all together. Mom sent 1 card in 5 years. Christmas, year 3. A folded piece of cardstock with a blurry nativity scene and exactly 5 words inside. Hope you're doing okay. D. Not love, Mom. Not I miss you. Just that. I stared at it for hours before putting it in the fireplace. Then this spring an email came. Subject line: Reconnection. Sender: Danielle Evans.82 at Outlook. No greeting. Just, I know it's been a long time. I've ended things with Carter for good. I'd like to talk. I've been doing therapy. Please think about a session. All of us together. I miss you girls. I read it 5 times. Forwarded it to Nana. Sat on it for 3 weeks. Then I told Mallory and Zoe. They didn't react the way I thought they would. Mallory said she'd like to see her, just to hear her voice again. Zoe said nothing, but I saw the way her hand tightened around her juice glass. I asked Nana what she thought. she said. It's your decision now. But broken glass doesn't hold water. I didn't sleep that night. I kept picturing her at some desk in some sad apartment, typing that email and hitting send, convinced it would undo 5 years of silence. It almost worked. Because part of me still wanted a mother. Not the real one, the idea of one. We met at a small diner on Route 42. Neutral ground. I chose it because the walls were yellow and everything smelled like syrup. I figured if it went bad, at least the pancakes would taste like something. She arrived first. Sat near the window with a nervous smile and a trembling cup of tea. Mallory waved. Zoe kept her hood up. I slid into the booth and stared at her. She looked older. Thinner. Hollow behind the eyes. She tried to hug me. I leaned away. The server came. We ordered quietly. No one touched the menus. She said she'd been clean for over a year. Said Carter was out of the picture. Said she missed us every day, especially birthdays. Said she knew she made mistakes. She used that word a lot. Mistakes. As if her entire motherhood had been a typo. And then she asked it. Would you girls ever consider coming home? The air left the table like a kicked chair. Mallory looked down. Zoe flinched. I didn't move. She smiled again, too big. Too hopeful. I think we could fix this. I really do. No one answered. I reached for the syrup bottle just to do something with my hands. That night, she sent me a follow-up email. I was really hurt you didn't hug me. It's no wonder the girls are so distant. You've always set the tone for how they treat me. I stared at the screen until my eyes watered. Then I closed my laptop. And realized. She didn't come to reconnect. She came to reclaim. She lost custody 5 years ago, but somehow she still thinks I'm the one who took her children. The therapy office was beige in the way grief sometimes is, quiet, polite, unmemorable. A fake fern sat in the corner like a joke no one wanted to explain. The chairs were soft but unforgiving, built for posture not comfort. The air smelled like recycled breath and peppermint tea. She was already there when we arrived. Hair straightened, makeup light, body stiff with performance. Mallory offered a cautious smile. Zoe sat beside me, arms crossed so tight it looked like she was holding herself shut. The therapist, a woman named Clarice, had a voice like melting wax. Soft. Melodic. Practiced. She welcomed us. Thanked us. Promised neutrality. Then she began the usual dance, names, dynamics, history. I kept my eyes on the framed diploma behind her. Something in Latin. Probably said you'll be fine in cursive. My mother spoke first. Of course she did. She talked about being young and trying her best. About trauma. About love. She mentioned Carter only once, quickly, vaguely, like he was a pothole she tripped over, not a man she let live in our house for 5 years. Clarice nodded. Took notes. Mallory looked down at her lap. Zoe stared at the bookshelf. I watched my mother's hands. Perfectly still in her lap, like folded lies. She described her pain as complex. Her decisions as misguided. Her role as unfortunate. I felt my nails digging into the fabric of my jeans. Each phrase tightened something behind my ribs. And then with the same breath she used to say she missed our birthdays, she said this. Rachel told them not to talk to me. She's been poisoning them against me for years. The silence that followed was so loud it felt physical. Clarice looked up from her notepad. I could hear the air whistling through the vents. Mallory flinched. Zoe blinked slowly. And something broke. Not outside. Inside. It wasn't rage. Not the red, shaking kind. It was older than that. Deeper. A grief made of rot and static. Like finding mold in a photograph you thought had survived the flood. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move. I just opened my mouth and everything I had carried for a decade came out like fog spilling from a locked freezer. I spoke of nights on the kitchen floor, holding my sister while she hyperventilated. Of watching Mallory hide bruises under stage makeup. Of lying to teachers, to police, to myself. Of the time I found Zoe's hair in the drain after she tried to cut it all off. Not because she wanted a change, but because Carter liked it long. Of the notebook I kept under my mattress, full of evidence I prayed I'd never need to use. I described how our mother used my back as a confessional booth. How she'd cry into my hands about how hard it was to be loved by men who hurt her. And how somehow we became the collateral for her choices. I said all of it. No yelling. No crying. Just truth, like a slow drip from a cracked faucet. And when I finally looked up, Clarice had lowered her pen. Mallory had tears on her shirt. Zoe was shaking. My mother was staring at the wall, jaw clenched, eyes glistening with fury and something else, maybe shame, maybe not. She didn't apologize. She didn't even flinch. She just stood up and left. The door clicked shut like punctuation. The therapist ended the session 10 minutes early. Said it was best to take space. I sat in the car afterward and didn't drive. Didn't speak. Just stared at the dashboard, where the check engine light glowed like it had been waiting for a metaphor. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed and replayed the words over and over. She's been poisoning them. It wasn't just a lie. It was a strategy. An accusation designed to turn my sisters into weapons. To make herself the victim again, not of Carter, not of the court, but of me. That's when I knew. There would be no healing. Only erasure. She didn't want forgiveness. She wanted the narrative back. The next morning, I found Zoe sitting on the back steps, knees pulled to her chest, hair tangled with dew. She didn't say a word. Just handed me a crumpled note. 4 words. Handwritten. Torn. Tell them I tried. It was my mother's handwriting. No greeting. No apology. Just the same sentence she'd used to excuse every failure since the day Carter moved in. I folded the note in half not to keep it, but to make it smaller. Time didn't move the way it used to. Not after that session. It felt broken, like a clock where the hands clicked forward only when no one was looking. The days came anyway, soft, slow, sometimes full of sun, sometimes heavier than sleep. We didn't talk about the therapy. Not at dinner. Not in passing. Not even during the silence-heavy walks from school or the soundless minutes before sleep. It was as if naming it again would wake something none of us could bear to reface. Zoe started spending more time at the pond behind Nana's house. Just sitting there, alone, sketching cattails and dragonflies in a notebook that didn't belong to any class. Mallory stopped rehearsing her monologue for the spring play. I found the script in the trash one morning, folded between a cereal box and a used tea bag. I, on the other hand, kept busy. I organized drawers that didn't need organizing. Washed dishes that were already clean. Walked 3 miles a day just to remember what it felt like to move away from something. There's a kind of grief that doesn't cry. It tidies. It sorts. It goes silent and tries to live around the sharp edges of memory. That's what we were doing. Nana didn't push. She just kept the porch light on longer. Bought a new puzzle every week. Made too much soup. The quiet was her version of holding us. She knew. Maybe better than we did. Because once, years ago, she had watched her own daughter disappear into a man's shadow and hadn't been able to pull her back out. I remember catching her staring at a photo of my mother when she thought no one was watching. Not the woman who'd written us cruel emails. Not the one who blamed her own child for stealing her family. Just a girl in a birthday dress. Gap-toothed and glowing. Nana wiped her eyes and said nothing. Some names were heavier when whispered. I got a job at the local clinic answering phones. The building was small, with chip paint and lavender air fresheners in every room. Most calls were reschedules or flu shots. But I liked it. It was clean, simple, full of people who didn't know anything about me except my name on a badge. That anonymity tasted like freedom. But it didn't last. 2 weeks into the job, I got a call from a blocked number. I didn't pick up. The voicemail was short. Her voice. Controlled. Too calm. She said she'd heard I was working now. Said she'd like to talk. Just the two of us. Without the therapist. Woman to woman, she called it. I deleted the message. The next day, she sent flowers to the front desk. No card. No one at the clinic knew the context. They just assumed it was a kind gesture. I left them in the break room. By lunchtime, they were gone. Then came the letter. A real one in an envelope with my name handwritten in blue ink. It arrived on a Monday, folded 3 times, soft at the corners. I didn't read it right away. I set it on the counter and made tea. Watched steam rise. Stared out the window for an hour. When I finally opened it, the handwriting was careful. Measured. She didn't ask how I was. She said she'd been hurt by what I said in therapy. Said my outburst had derailed her healing. Said she needed space and that until I could offer a proper apology she was going no contact. She ended the letter by calling herself a survivor. Said she'd done what she could. That the rest was out of her hands. But what lingered most wasn't the blame. It was the invitation buried between the lines, the subtle manipulation that sounded like mourning. As if she was the one who'd been abandoned. As if we were the ones who'd broken her. I folded the letter once. Then again. Then once more. Made it as small as possible. dropped it in the kitchen trash between a used coffee filter and a crumpled flyer from the hardware store. Nana found Zoe crying that night in the hallway. Not sobbing. Just sitting there, knees pulled up, cheeks wet, like a faucet someone had left on. Mallory curled up beside her without a word. I watched from the stairs and did nothing. Because sometimes comfort feels like an apology. And I wasn't sorry. Not for telling. Not for protecting them. Not for surviving what she refused to name. The next morning I opened the windows and let spring into the house. Breeze. Birds. The faint smell of wet dirt and moss. I made pancakes. Zoe came to the table first. Then Mallory. No one said anything. But we all ate. And when Nana sat down last, I saw her eyes were red. We didn't ask. We just passed the syrup. She said she was done with me. But the next week she showed up at our school. The school called just after lunch. I was folding blankets at the clinic when my phone buzzed. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, unfamiliar. They asked if I could come down. That someone had been waiting outside the campus for over an hour and asked to speak to Zoe. I didn't need to ask who. By the time I got there, she was gone. Not Zoe, her. My mother. They said she'd already been escorted off the property. No police were called, not technically, because she hadn't made it inside. Just lingered near the visitor parking lot, asking for Zoe by name. Said she was family. Security had asked her to leave. She didn't argue. Just nodded and walked toward her car. But not before handing over a sealed envelope addressed to my daughters. They gave it to me. I didn't open it. Just slipped it into my pocket like it was something radioactive. When I found Zoe later that evening, she was in the barn with the lights off, sitting in the empty stall where Nana used to keep goats. Her back was against the far wall and she looked more like a shadow than a girl. I didn't speak. Just sat down beside her. She didn't ask anything. Didn't cry. Just leaned her head on my shoulder and stayed there until the dark grew too cold to ignore. The next morning, Nana found the envelope in the trash unopened but not untouched. She didn't ask how it got there. She just took out the garbage a few hours early. After that, there were no more calls. No letters. No messages. But the quiet wasn't peace. It was a coil tightening the pause before another attempt. Because she didn't want closure. She wanted control dressed as reconciliation. 3 days later, Nana got a call at the house. This time it was my mother's sister, Aunt Gwen. A woman we hadn't spoken to in nearly 6 years. She said my mother was in a bad place. That she'd tried to reach out. That she'd been slandered and shut out. She said that if we weren't careful, we'd regret it. That family couldn't be replaced. That a mother's love was complicated, not conditional. Nana didn't respond. Just ended the call and unplugged the landline for the rest of the night. By the weekend, my mother had moved on to a new tactic. She called Mallory's dance coach. Claimed she was planning to attend the spring showcase. Asked if she could purchase a reserved seat. Gave a name the coach didn't recognize, a different surname. A thin veil of pretend. The coach mentioned it casually at rehearsal. Mallory didn't respond. Just walked out mid-run-through and didn't come back. I found her in her room that night, curled up with her back to the door. She hadn't turned the lights on. I sat with her until she fell asleep, her breathing sharp, uneven, like someone who couldn't find their place in the air. On Sunday, we finally talked. Nana, Mallory, Zoe, and I. Around the kitchen table. No tears. No yelling. Just facts. We listed what had happened. Every intrusion. Every reach. Every manipulation dressed as mothering. It didn't feel like betrayal anymore. It felt like documentation. Like we were preparing for a trial, even if no court would ever hear it. When it came time to decide, no one hesitated. Nana made the call. A lawyer. Not aggressive but firm. She'd helped other families before. Understood how these things worked when children weren't small anymore, but the damage still was. By Tuesday, the paperwork was filed. Cease and desist. Boundary enforcement. A formal notice, not legal custody talk, but a clear message, stay away. I didn't expect a response. Not directly. But later that week, someone left a voicemail on Nana's burner phone, the one she kept for emergencies. The voice was slurred. Emotional. Familiar. She said we were cruel. That she was trying to heal. That we didn't understand how hard it had been for her. She ended with a line I can't forget. You can keep pretending you're the victims. But someday you'll need me. I played it twice. Then deleted it. Because we didn't need her. We needed air. And sun. And silence that wasn't haunted by apology-shaped poison. The showcase went on. Mallory danced like the stage was a confession booth. Like every movement was a word she'd never been allowed to say. Zoe and I stood in the back. Nana in the front row. There were no unexpected guests. No drama. No notes tucked under windshield wipers. Just clapping. Just flowers. Just the sound of a life unfolding without interruption. But a week later a letter came, not to me this time, but to Zoe. The envelope was pale pink. No return address. Just Zoe's name written in thick, looping script, like something out of a children's birthday card. It arrived on a Wednesday morning, tucked between a grocery store flyer and an overdue water bill. Nana found it first and left it on the kitchen table without a word. When Zoe came home from school and saw it, she didn't touch it. Just stared at it like it might bite. I watched her eyes move over the lettering, then flick to me, then back to the table. She didn't cry. She didn't run. She simply walked to her room and closed the door behind her. The envelope stayed there all afternoon. By evening, Mallory placed a bowl over it like a lid on something souring. We ate dinner in silence. Later, I peeled the envelope open myself. Not to invade. Not to shield. Just to confirm. It wasn't a letter. Not exactly. It was a collage. Torn magazine clippings, stickers, glitter-glued phrases arranged like a ransom note from someone who didn't know what love looked like anymore. In the center was a photo, one of those old Polaroids she used to snap at the beach. Zoe, age 6, grinning through missing teeth, holding a plastic shovel. My mother had labeled it in black ink. You were always my sunshine. Below it, cut from a magazine. Come home. Let's be US again. I burned it in the sink that night. No ceremony. No speech. Just a match and a bowl of water nearby in case the flames got too eager. Zoe didn't ask what happened to it. She just slept with the light on for 3 nights straight. After that, the messages stopped. No calls. No envelopes. Not even third-party attempts from estranged relatives. But the absence didn't feel like relief. It felt like a fuse going quiet before it sparks again. Mallory threw herself into college applications. Stayed up late researching scholarships. Her room became a fortress of sticky notes and highlighters. Zoe withdrew. Stopped sketching. Spent more time staring at windows than through them. I kept showing up to the clinic, answering phones, taking notes, trying to exist in a world that didn't carry our history like a bruise. But even there I felt it. The tension that never quite left my shoulders. The way my eyes flinched when the phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. One night, I overheard Nana praying in the living room. Not loudly. Just a soft murmur, like she was trying to reason with something invisible. Her voice cracked only once right after she said my mother's name. She never saw me standing in the hallway. Sometimes grief is quieter than hate. We thought we were doing the right thing, cutting the cord clean. No contact. No second chances. But closure doesn't feel clean. It drags behind you, heavy and shapeless like wet fabric. And in those long, still hours after midnight, it's easy to question everything. Was I protecting them or punishing her? Was I doing what was right or what felt safest? The answer never came. But one morning I woke up and realized something was missing. The fear. I didn't check the windows. Didn't scan the street for a parked car. Didn't flinch at the mail. That was the victory. Not forgiveness. Not understanding. Just space. Space to breathe. Space to become someone without a shadow. And then, just when I thought we buried her for good, she showed up at Nana's gate. It was a Sunday. The kind where the wind smells like rain but nothing ever falls. Mallory was in the kitchen making pancakes. Zoe was still in bed. I was halfway through folding laundry when I heard the screen door creak, a sound so soft I almost didn't register it. Then Nana called my name. Once. Low. Calm. But with an edge that turned my blood cold. I stepped outside barefoot. She was standing just beyond the fence line. Not on the porch. Not on the path. Just past the old gate with the crooked latch, like she was waiting for permission to re-enter a world she no longer owned. She looked small. Tired. Dressed in a jacket too thin for the wind. Her hands were bare and trembling. No bags. No letters. Just her. I didn't move. Neither did she. We stood there for a long time. The air between us full of things unsaid, unwelcome, unhealed. Then without a word, she reached into her coat and pulled out a small box. Not wrapped. Not labeled. Just taped shut and held like it weighed more than her. She set it down at the gate. Gently. Like it might break. I still hadn't spoken. She looked at me once, not pleading, not angry, not anything I could name, and then turned and walked away. No goodbye. No drama. Just the sound of her footsteps fading into gravel. I waited a full 5 minutes before approaching the gate. The box was unsealed. The tape was old. It peeled away like dead skin. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Old ones, birthdays, field trips, naps on couches. Some I remembered. Some I didn't. And tucked between them all was a folded note. 6 words. I know what I didn't do. That was it. No apology. No signature. No ask. Just that. I stood there for a long time. The box heavy in my arms, the words heavier in my chest. She hadn't come for redemption. She hadn't come to beg. She came to leave. Not forgiveness. Not peace. Just proof that somewhere beneath the layers of excuses and blame, there was a part of her that finally knew. Knew what she'd allowed. What she'd ignored. What she'd damaged beyond return. And maybe, just maybe, that sliver of knowing was the only justice we'd ever get. I burned the note. Not out of anger. But because it wasn't mine to carry. The photos, though, I kept those. Not to remember her. But to remember us. Who we were before the story bent sideways. Who we managed to become in spite of her. Mallory framed one. The 3 of us at the county fair. Cotton candy in our hair. Our faces sunburned and joyful. Zoe hung another above her desk. A beach shot. Her with a shovel. Me in the background. Our mother's shadow just barely visible at the corner of the frame. Sometimes we look at that photo and pretend it's just bad cropping. Months passed. Mallory left for college with a scholarship we all cried over. Zoe started painting again. I got promoted at the clinic. We talked less about her. Not because we were afraid, but because the story had finally finished telling itself. She was gone. Not dead. Just absent in the kind of way that doesn't echo anymore. And in her absence we grew. Not because she gave us space, but because we took it. She told me I'd regret turning them against her. But they were never hers to begin with.